She walked out with my dog, my pension, and her new real man. And by the next week, he was flipping pancakes in my kitchen. She thought I'd crawl. I didn't say a word, but what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The living room still smelled like burnt coffee and motor oil, two scents that clung to my clothes no matter how many times Melissa used to nag me to change before coming inside. Now the house was quiet. Her boots, always loud across the hardwood, had made their final exit. She hadn't packed much, just enough to make a statement. The suitcase had been waiting by the door since last night. I'd seen it, pretended I hadn't. "You've lost your fire, Alan," she spat, like I was something expired in the back of the fridge. "Jake knows what a real man is." I didn't ask what that meant. Didn't have to. Melissa had been rehearsing that line in her head for weeks, maybe months. And now, she delivered it like a final blow, expecting me to flinch, to crack, to maybe even fight for her. I didn't. Jake. The name oozed from her mouth like it meant something. I'd seen him once, briefly, popped in to pick her up when her car wouldn't start. He wore that smugness that comes with too much attention and too little responsibility. The kind of man who spends more time polishing his reflection than his character. 39, still calling his mother Ma in public, but he had a six-pack and a tan, so I guess that made him real enough for her. She wanted a man who made her feel young again. And me? I was the man who remembered when she broke her ankle at that cabin in Michigan. The man who worked overtime for 3 months to afford her father's funeral costs. The man who never missed her mother's Sunday dinners, no matter how many jabs she threw at my blue-collar hands and grease-ringed fingernails. But that kind of man doesn't fit into Instagram posts and mimosa brunches. So, I stood in my stained coveralls, still smelling like the mower I'd just repaired, and let her walk out. No words, no last request, just the sound of paper ripping. Our marriage certificate torn in half like a grocery list she didn't need anymore. She took the house, the dog, half of everything I'd built, and she thought she'd taken my dignity too. But you see, Melissa never understood the quiet kind of man. The kind who doesn't shout when he's wounded, who doesn't show the fire burning until it's already swallowed the forest. She thought she won. I let her think that. The worst betrayals don't happen in hotel rooms or midnight texts. They happen in daylight, in kitchens you once painted together, in routines that used to feel sacred. Saturday coffee, Sunday crossword, her humming off key while burning eggs. Now those rituals were props in someone else's performance. It didn't even take a full week. 7 days after Melissa walked out, Jake was in my house, in my kitchen, pouring batter into the pan I bought her for our anniversary, shirtless, smug, the sun catching his freshly waxed arms like it was lighting him for a magazine shoot. His tattoos looked expensive. So did the gold watch next to the skillet. She stood beside him, arm around his waist, eyes tight behind that smile, the kind of smile people wear when they're pretending they haven't made a mistake. The photos were public. Jake made sure of that. My buddy Troy, who'd known me since high school and still wore his badge like a second skin, texted the screenshots with no commentary. Just a timestamp, just proof. They captioned it, "Starting over." Melissa's hand rested on Jake's chest like she was planting a flag, claiming territory, maybe herself. By Tuesday, the divorce petition landed in my inbox. Irreconcilable differences, marked by a shaky X. But under reason for filing, she checked a box that stung more than I expected. Emotional neglect. I read the words twice, then again, like they might rearrange themselves into something less hollow. Neglect? I didn't forget her birthday. Didn't raise my voice. Didn't vanish into bars or silence. I was there. I fixed the furnace in January when it coughed its last. I held her when she sobbed the night her sister lost the baby. I paid the bills, made sure her mother's prescriptions stayed filled, let her pick the movie even when I knew I'd hate it. But I wasn't loud about it. I didn't need applause. I wasn't absent. I was just quiet. There's a difference between silence and abandonment, between steadiness and apathy, but some people don't understand that. They think love has to be loud, has to come with a spotlight and a soundtrack. Jake knew how to pose for a picture. I knew how to show up when no one was watching. She thought my silence meant weakness. She never thought it might mean calculation. People mistake quiet for surrender, but silence can be a sheath, a place where sharp things wait. Melissa never knew the man she walked out on wasn't just a mechanic with sore knees and stained shirts. She saw a man who patched engines, not plans. But I'd spent my life fixing what other people broke, and I'd learned to do it with precision. She didn't know I'd never removed my name from the second mortgage. I let her believe I had, just like I let her believe she'd won. She wanted the house. Fine, let her have it. Or think she did. The deed still came with my signature. She could repaint the walls and light candles on the counter, but ownership is ink on paper, not filters on a phone. 2 days before she left, she cried in the kitchen. Said she couldn't afford the hotel room she claimed she needed for space. Said she was broke, that we needed to rethink our finances. I nodded, said I'd take care of it. Then I watched from the ATM camera as she drained $3,000 from our joint account and tucked it into her purse like a getaway driver folding a map. I downloaded the photos, dated, time-stamped, stored twice. Jake? He didn't know about the lien I quietly filed on the home equity line. He strutted through my halls like a conqueror, unaware that his little castle had a sinkhole beneath it. Melissa probably promised him a fresh start, a home with equity, maybe even investment potential. But equity can be frozen, especially when a signature is missing, especially when that signature is mine. Neither of them knew the security system I installed last Christmas, the one Melissa said made the house feel paranoid, was still linked to my cloud. Cameras in the driveway, living room, and hallway. Motion detection. Audio enabled. I watched their performances unfold like a sitcom gone wrong. Jake slamming doors, Melissa crying in the guest bathroom, the dog I trained whining by the back door no one used anymore. Some nights, Jake didn't come back until after 2. Other nights, he slept on the couch, shirtless, scrolling his phone while Melissa curled up like regret in the corner of the love seat. I didn't smile. I didn't laugh. I just watched. She thought she'd upgraded, but upgrades don't come with interest rates, liens, and hidden cameras. She thought I was done. I was just getting started. The fall didn't start with a bang. It began with a beep. Declined. Jake's titanium-plated, ego-sized credit card sputtered at the register of that upscale brunch spot Melissa used to fantasize about while eating peanut butter toast in our kitchen. The waiter gave him a polite smile, the kind that barely hides pity. Jake turned red. Melissa dug through her purse, offered a debit card with trembling fingers. It cleared. Barely. He blamed the bank. She didn't believe him. Neither of them understood the chain reaction had already begun. The following Tuesday, the power cut out mid-live stream. Melissa had started some DIY lifestyle channel, desperate to prove she hadn't just married well, but was well-adjusted. One moment she was talking about feng shui and herbal teas. The next, her screen flickered to black. She lit candles and cursed the outage, never suspecting the account was still under my name. I'd stopped payments a week prior, in compliance with the divorce decree that granted her full responsibility for household utilities. She must have skipped that line while circling irreconcilable. Then came the letter. A fat, impersonal envelope taped to the door with the county's official seal. Foreclosure proceedings. Melissa tore it open on the porch, hands shaking, eyes darting like someone expecting a punch. But there was no punch, just facts, figures, and deadlines. She'd assumed I'd refinanced the second mortgage when she moved in with Jake. She assumed wrong. When she finally called me, breath short, voice high, I didn't pick up. Instead, I texted her a screenshot of the settlement agreement. Black and white, no room for interpretation. Per divorce decree, I owe you nothing. This house isn't yours anymore. No hello, no explanation. Just the truth she'd ignored. The silence after that must have been louder than any fight we'd ever had. Jake didn't last much longer. Melissa caught him in the bathroom, door locked, screen lit, texting his ex. She must have sensed something off in his laugh lately, in how his touches felt more obligatory than affectionate. He claimed it was nothing. She didn't believe him. The shouting that night woke the neighbors. He left with a duffel bag and his protein powder, muttering about needing space and clarity. By the weekend, he'd updated his Instagram bio to temporarily relocated, which in reality meant his mother's basement in the suburbs. The man she called real was now sleeping under Star Wars bedsheets in his childhood room. Melissa? She stayed in the dark, literally and figuratively, surrounded by unpaid bills, flickering candles, and the echo of every decision she thought made her smarter than me. The wind carried the scent of October oil and fallen leaves into the open garage that afternoon. I was elbow-deep in a '92 Dodge carburetor, the kind of work that demands steady hands and a patient mind. The radio played low in the background, old country, the kind that knew something about regret. I heard the crunch of gravel before I saw her. She stood at the edge of the bay, hesitant, like a stranger unsure of her welcome. Same coat, the rust-colored one with the velvet collar I bought her for our 20th anniversary. It looked more worn now, shoulders sagged, the fabric faded from sunlight and time. She clutched it closed with both hands, like it could hold in everything she'd lost. Her voice cracked before it cleared her throat. "Alan, I made a mistake." I didn't lift my eyes right away. The carburetor was caked in grime, the choke plate stuck, gaskets worn thin, like 100 other things people forget to maintain until it's too late. I kept working. She stepped closer, tears threading through the makeup she hadn't bothered to reapply. No perfume, no gloss. Just a face that looked like she'd spent weeks trying not to cry and failed all the same. "He was just so confident," she said, more to herself than to me. "He made me feel seen." I stood then, slowly, not in a rush. I wiped my hands on a red rag stained with years of grease and silence. Then I looked at her, not with anger, not with pity. Just with the clear, steady gaze of a man who'd already buried the part of himself that needed closure. "You left a man who fixes things," I said, voice low, quiet like a verdict, "for a boy who breaks them." That was it. No yelling, no demands, just the truth, simple and final. She flinched, just a little. Because words like that don't scream. They settle. They echo. They leave marks that don't bruise the skin but cut far deeper. She nodded once, lips trembling, eyes darting as if hoping to find some version of me that hadn't already walked away on the inside. But that man was gone. The one who stayed through the hard years, who forgave quietly, who fixed what others didn't even notice was broken. He wasn't standing here anymore. I turned back to the engine. The wind carried her silence away. The courtroom smelled like old paper and fluorescent lights, the kind of sterile air where truth either flickers or burns clean through. I'd been here once before, years ago, for a traffic citation. That time I stood in line, nervous, unsure. This time, I walked in with my shoulders square and my spine straight. not to punish, not to gloat, just to finish what she started. Melissa sat 2 rows ahead, flanked by her attorney, shifting in her seat like the cushion was lined with thorns. Her hair was pulled back in that careful way she used when she wanted to appear composed, but it didn't hide the tension in her jaw or the way her hands kept worrying the strap of her purse. Jake was absent. Not a surprise. Cowards rarely show up when paperwork replaces fists. When the clerk called my name, I stepped forward and opened the manila folder I'd carried like a scalpel. Bank statements, withdrawal receipts, notarized documents, all arranged in chronological order. I spoke clearly, each sentence precise. I didn't embellish, I didn't need to. Facts don't sweat. I showed the transfers Melissa made from our joint account days before walking out. Cash she claimed she never touched. I pointed to the forged loan application she filed using my social security number, co-signed in haste after Jake convinced her he could flip the property into something bigger. The signature wasn't mine, not even close, sloppy, rushed, like everything they'd built together. Her attorney stammered something about emotional strain and confused financial delegation. The judge didn't even look up from the file. He just turned a page, adjusted his glasses, and delivered the decision like a scalpel sliding into soft flesh. Claim to spousal support is denied. Evidence presented demonstrates clear misrepresentation and financial misconduct. Melissa blinked, as if the words were in another language. She leaned forward, lips parted, eyes darting toward her lawyer for an explanation that wouldn't come. There was no drama, no shouting, just the quiet collapse of entitlement. When the judge asked if I wished to pursue damages, I paused. Not because I was unsure, but because the question itself was unnecessary. "No, Your Honor," I said. "I'm not here for compensation, just closure." And that was the truth. I didn't need her money. I needed my name clean, my record straight, and the last tie between us dissolved in ink and silence. It didn't happen all at once. Collapse never does. It's not a single thunderclap. It's the steady groan of weak foundations giving way under the weight of arrogance. Melissa's world unraveled like an old sweater, one pulled thread at a time. The first to go was the illusion. She walked out thinking she was stepping into something better, brighter, shinier. A future built on brunch photos and gym-side selfies. But illusions don't pay mortgages. And when the money ran dry, so did the fantasy. She sold her engagement ring for rent, the same ring I spent 6 weeks' wages on back in '98. Platinum band, sapphire center. She wanted something unique, not a diamond like the rest. I remember the way her eyes lit up when she opened the box, the way she whispered, "It's perfect." Now it sat in a pawn shop case between dusty guitars and cracked cell phones, reduced to a quick buck and a quiet shame. Jake vanished like steam off hot asphalt. No goodbye, no explanation. One minute he was posting shirtless in the backyard, the next he was blocking her number and liking his ex's baby photos. Whatever fantasy she'd built around him crumbled with a quiet text that never came. Her sister cut ties, said Melissa brought drama into the family, said she was tired of defending choices that looked more like impulsive escapes than actual decisions. The job followed soon after. Failure to report, disruption of team morale. HR speak for, "We're done cleaning up your mess." Then came the message. "I miss who you were." 7 words, no punctuation, like it was drafted in a hurry or maybe through tears. I stared at it longer than I should have. Not out of longing, not out of hurt, just reflection. She didn't say she missed me. She missed a version of me that served her needs, that steadied the world while she set it spinning, that tolerated silence, neglect, betrayal. I didn't reply. I was busy. My nephew Caleb and I had just signed the lease on a 2-bay shop outside town. Nothing fancy. Cinder block, tin roof, oil-stained concrete. But it was ours. We painted the sign ourselves. Rebuild and run. The name made us laugh. But it was true. You fix what's broken, and then you move forward. Some people collapse under the weight of their own choices. Others rebuild and never look back. The parking lot smelled like rain and cut grass. One of those spring mornings that feels like the world's been rinsed clean. I wasn't in a hurry. Just needed coffee, a loaf of bread, and maybe a few minutes alone between engine builds and parts orders. Nothing more. Nothing less. I didn't expect to see her. She stood by the bananas, pretending to inspect a bruised one, her cart half empty. Hair pulled into a careless knot. Sweatshirt oversized and sleeves too long. Not the sharp version of herself she used to rehearse in the mirror. No makeup. No mask. Just the face of someone who'd learned that time doesn't slow down for regret. I saw her before she saw me. But she did see me. I caught it in the flicker, that half-second glance before her eyes dropped like a guilty hand. She turned slightly, pretending to examine produce she didn't plan to buy. The distance between us was no more than 15 feet, but it felt like a country mile. Funny how silence can stretch like that. She didn't speak, didn't wave, just fumbled with her cart, trying to steer it away as casually as possible, like I hadn't noticed. But I had. I didn't follow, didn't force it. Because victory doesn't look like confrontation. It doesn't come with raised voices or dramatic lines. It's quieter than that. Real victory is peace, the kind that lives in your chest and doesn't need an audience. I wore clean jeans that day, a fresh shave, the smell of cedar soap still lingering on my skin. My boots didn't squeak. My breath didn't hitch. I walked with no weight on my shoulders, no ghosts pulling at my collar. She looked right through me and didn't recognize what she'd once called home. And that was the win. Not revenge, not her collapse. Just the truth, that I'd rebuilt without her, that I'd found calm in the wreckage, that I didn't need her to look back, to explain, to apologize. I had already closed that chapter with a wrench, a handshake, and silence. She turned the corner near the frozen aisle, disappeared behind a display of canned soup. And that was the last time I saw her. Didn't need to see her again. Because sometimes the loudest justice is the one that walks away. Steady, quiet, whole.